Okay, you guys, welcome to another episode of the Think Bigger podcast, Community Conversations. Today on Community Conversations, we have my friend Daniel Song.
What's going on, Mike?
Dude, it's good to have you.
It's good to see you again, man.
It's very good to see you too. You know what? There are a lot of ways that I could introduce you on the podcast. You are a father, a businessman, a husband, a car enthusiast, and just those alone are hours of conversation, right? But forget that. I mean, we'll get to those, right?
Yeah.
How does Daniel define himself?
I like to think of myself as a fairly balanced person.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't do one thing to the extreme.
Okay.
You know, again, I have different priorities in my life: my faith, my family, obviously my business, my children.
Yes.
And definitely my hobbies.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, if there's one simple way to wrap things up, I would say I'm a fairly balanced person.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of the listeners do come from the automotive world. Subsequently, I think some of them are already going to have it click. Mm-hmm. But many do not come from the automotive world. You know, that's the beautiful thing about technology. You disseminate this information in various, platforms, and it brings together a very interesting demographic.
Yeah.
I got like 14 to like 60-year-olds. It's pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? So with that being said, the car guys are going to know, right? But out of all those things that I mentioned before, you said balanced, right? So we can get families first. Mm-hmm. So let's talk, faith and then family. So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
So the first word that came out of your mouth when I asked you to define yourself was faith.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Why? Why was that the first one?
You know, I think it's fairly interesting. I grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid. My dad is a pastor of a Korean American church. So I grew up in the church environment. And so as a young kid, it's kind of what you grow up with. It's kind of what you just assume to be truth and religion and whatever it is. And to be very transparent, I had a sort of falling out, if you will, right around late high school, early college.
Okay.
And that's right around the time, again, like I said, intellectually, I thought I was at the top of my game.
Sure.
Not only that, right after college, I was introduced to the world of entrepreneurship. And, of course, a lot of these empowerment books are about you can do it.
Correct.
You can make it happen. You control your outcome.
Correct.
So a lot of that kind of played into, when I started seeing success early on in my young 20s, there was this mindset that it was me doing it all. You know what I mean? This idea that there was no outside help, there was no outside influence, And so for years, I think I had kind of a falling out, and it wasn't until sort of a major disruption in my life, maybe about 9 years ago, where my business just kind of hit a wall, like something I just never expected. I had a partner who was almost like a family friend. She's almost like a godmother figure in my life, that we had built a substantial business with, and just overnight the family had just essentially yanked the business away from me. Now again, I was in my young 20s when we had partnered, and so there was no signed contracts, no business partnerships. It was almost like a family deal, right? Sure. And so suddenly legally I was not only kicked out of a partnership but a multiple six-figure income. And
so they just took it from you.
Yeah, and I consulted with my general counsel, and there was just really not much on my side to protect me. And legally, yeah. So it was just going to be a frivolous lawsuit for me to pursue this. And so, it took that time, that major disruption, to really just knock me on my ass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And start to really reevaluate. And here I thought I was Mr. Invincible, that this is all under my control. And clearly, there are variables in life that you just don't control.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, that humbling moment kind of allowed me to just reevaluate my life. Again, I think I was engaged with my now wife at that time.
Okay.
We had 2 children, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But that allowed me to reevaluate my priorities, and it was at that point that I kind of rediscovered sort of my walk, my faith, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not here to necessarily push my faith on anybody.
No,
but look,
I
think to believe that you are the center of your own universe, that says a lot about maybe even you. I truly believe there is a sense of, at the very least, even if we're not talking religion, there's a sense of peace and just a little bit of like a reassurance that you get that certain things that are not in your control, that you can kind of defer it away. You know what I mean? And at the very least, even if we're not talking religion, I mean, if you look at primal ancient civilization, right?
Okay.
One of the reasons why they worship deities and different god figures is because they just couldn't understand the concept of rain, weather, seasons, right? And I'm not saying that's where my walk is. Obviously, I have a deeper faith. I have a God that I believe in. But I'm just saying at the very least, that's what it does for you. And that's kind of an important part of my life. And, reprioritizing in that order, faith, family, and business.
Yes.
What's really crazy, Mike, is that my businesses today do far better with far less effort. And what I mean by that is, when I was single, when I was a young adult, when religion wasn't a part of my life, I thought I was like a hardcore entrepreneur. Like,
sure,
I could travel wherever I wanted to. I could build where I could drop, move, do anything I needed to be agile, nimble, and just aggressive to build my business. And I did well, but now here I am. Obviously, a lot of my time is spent with my family. I don't travel as much. I'm not hardcore, quote unquote. I do work hard.
Yes.
But in a unique way, my business is able to thrive. And I just kind of wonder, like, hey, like if you do, it's like combination lock. If you can get your life's priorities in the right order, that lock should effortlessly open. And I feel like that's what it is.
Yes. Yeah. You touched on a lot of very, very solid points that, in this day and age, you kind of get pushed to the wayside.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, having faith in God, right? If you want to say a God or just God, right? People can give it the name that they so choose. That's not the debate. That's not what we're here to do.
Sure.
But like you said, this series of entrepreneurial ventures that you took on your own, even to the point of what many would consider a high level of success, especially at a young age.
Yeah.
You had to have this like full-blown shattering, and unfortunately also within family. Yeah. That apparently committed a very unethical act, and maybe you couldn't have done anything legal about it, but the ethical nature of what that sounds like is terrible.
Sure.
But I find it interesting because you bring up all these different things about faith, and one of the things that stood out to me is when you were talking about how when you read these books and we're listening to these speakers, it's you, right? You need to unlock the power of self. It's your willpower. It's your passion. You can do it. You. Now, for people of faith, that there's already going to be a bit of an understanding as to how that's dangerous.
Yeah.
For people who don't, either because of choice or just lack of exposure, they're going to be like, well, who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
And so that's where I find people who believe and people who don't, whether by choice or naivete, that's where it's a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because when you explain to them that ultimately it's not about you, they're going to say, well, who else is going to do it, if it's not me?
Sure.
And so I think that it's an amazing for you to be a living, breathing example, basically twice, because you built up business and you had to lose it, and now you built up more and you're even more successful.
Sure.
Right? And all of that has brought you back like money and success and the ability to purchase items that you so choose, provide for your family, etc. That usually takes people away from believing that they needed to believe in something else.
Sure.
It usually makes people believe I'm a living testament that if you work hard enough and believe in yourself hard enough, that's what it takes.
Sure.
So if you had to answer somebody who'd be like, who asked you that, to explain that, what would you say?
So, I mean, again, for somebody who leans with a little bit of faith in their life, I mean, even the Bible talks about faith without works is dead. So there's a responsibility where your creator, your divine God or whatever it is, that they do part of the equation. But part of that falls in your lap. Like, you can't just sit there. And it's kind of like, and again, I don't mean to knock it, but I mean, a few years ago, there was a book that came out called The Secret.
Yeah, sure.
It was this idea of this positive thinking would manifest things into your life.
Yes.
Now, I think that's part of it. Like, again, I think if your mind is toxic and you're just cynical, you're negative, and you're closed-minded, you are going to miss opportunities. You are going to miss those moments where things you can bring and attract things into your life. But I think too many people, what they got out of that book was, hey, if I have this just positive, wishful thinking, that things would just manifest. And I think even Dave Chappelle kind of did a spoof on it, like, so what are the hungry children in Africa going to do? Start thinking about sirloin steaks and it's just going to show up. There's an action and there's a follow through on positive mindset and just kind of this wishful thinking. So again, I think that, again, even in scripture talks about the action. And so even for somebody who doesn't necessarily believe in any religion per se, and they kind of believe, well, hey, who else is going to do it for me if it's just me? What I would tell you is this, like, don't look at it as what can you control versus what are things you don't control, right? So you look at, and my mentor taught me there, Daniel, there's the wind and there's the sail. The wind is stuff that you can't control.
Cannot.
Right? You can't control weather. You can't, and to some degree, you can't really control politics, right? I can't control what the Senate is doing right now. I can't control what the president is doing now. I can't even control what the economy is doing right now. Those are things that are outside of my control. So if I spend 80% of my day focused on things that I can't control, it's just going to lead to frustration, anger, resentment. Just generally, it's a negative feeling that you're going to get
Very much so, because you feel powerless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when it says it's up to you, I want our listeners or your listeners to understand when you hear that it's you have to do it. You are in control. Make sure it's over things that are genuinely in your control. What are you doing with your attitude every day, right?
Yes.
You wake up, you control 100% your attitude. You control 100% your own work ethic, right? What you do immediately around that first and second degree of things around you, I think that is what you need to focus on. So again, like, it's not necessarily faith, meaning you defer it off to religion. Maybe I'm just saying, hey, anything that's a wind issue, defer it away.
Yeah.
Because just don't spend too much time thinking about that kind of stuff. And just focus on the things you control and do your part in that ecosystem. You know?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very understated way of going about things, because what you said, if you were to break it down a little simply, it's understandable, but people are like, I don't know how to do that. And a lot of that comes from just being overstimulated. The problem with social media and the internet is you have the ability to literally bombard yourself with just too much.
Yeah.
And no human can filter through all of that to what's real and what's not real. And then with the titling of fake news, you have people who now they don't know when to acknowledge any source, because they immediately chuck it up to, well, I don't know if that's real news.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's a very scary thing, but people need to learn how to do that so that they can then focus on some of these more self-awareness based types of thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's an important thing to be able to have a conversation with an automotive enthusiast and the people who are going to relate to you in that way, right? Whether they don't know who you are, but they know the cars.
Yeah.
Because that's a very common thing now. People will see cars and they're memorable.
Yeah.
Builds will be memorable, but they don't necessarily look past the second sentence of the article, because people don't really read that much, right? So you having these successful businesses is a great coincidence for you being a car guy, because it provides the opportunity for you to build cars to a degree that people aspire to do, right? There are always going to be people who are going to aspire to just have one of the builds you've had, and then you had a pretty solid listing, which we'll get to, right? But okay, so we've touched on faith and how it's you feel like it's secured you to get to where you are right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then family, right? So you're a husband and a father, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, right? In the case of what you mentioned a little bit ago about you used to be able to travel, or so did, and now you spend more time at home with the family. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to be where you are business-wise on the hierarchy of the way you've set it all up, it allows you to be with your family more, right? So how did you meet your wife, and how did you guys end up deciding to have 1, 2, or 50 children? Like, how did that happen? Because as we get older, a lot of times that's just not really a talked about thing. It's like, oh, I'm married and I have kids. But no, man, I mean, why her? And why not an ex before her?
Yeah.
And how did you get to this point now where I saw the little ones, they're adorable.
Thank you.
Okay, so how did you get, why her? Why your wife?
So to kind of frame this correctly, again, I grew up most of my life, at least all my 20s, right up until my late 20s, thinking that I was going to be a bachelor. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like this person that was going to enjoy his life. Yeah, I would have a girlfriend or a relationship here and there, but nothing serious. And those that knew me in my 20s, I would even say, like, I have no desire to have children. So this is like a 180. And again, it's part of just this massive reset in my life. And again, you don't know what you don't know. And I never had kids, so I just assumed I would never want kids. And I just saw all the inconveniences. But not really the depth of love you would have for another person. So I'm not saying that look, in my early 20s, I would say I was a very selfish person. Now, not the obvious definition of selfish. It's not like me, where I would grab everything off the table.
But you were self-centered by definition.
Yeah, meaning
life was centered around you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would wake up, I determine my agenda, I determine what I want to eat, I determine when I go to sleep. Like, I didn't have to think for anybody else.
The parents listening right now are already knowing where you're going.
Yeah. And so the moment, obviously, and again, meeting my wife and fiance at the time, Melanie, that didn't really change. It wasn't until the dynamics of children came into play that it really changed. Now, I met Melanie at a job that I had. I was actually a art director of a large contemporary costume company and lingerie hosiery company. It's called Leg Avenue. So every Halloween, when you see the pop-up seasonal stores and you see the sexy nurses, the sexy pirates.
That was you?
Well, I didn't design the costumes, but I was the art director for that company.
So you're the one who created the packaging.
Heck yeah. And it had its perks. I mean, you get to see gorgeous models every day, go on photo shoots. I mean, literally, it was an amazing job. And so my wife was a regional salesperson for that company.
Okay.
So she was in charge of Colorado, Nevada, Arizona. And so during our company, we would always fly in our salespeople a couple times a year to train them on the new product line, do trade shows. And so, you know, we eyed each other. She's obviously beautiful and leagues above where I'm at. So I'm just like, wow, that girl's amazing. And, you know, she would ask to request to have me do some projects and stuff like that. And that turned into the start of our relationship. Now, it was an uphill battle because number one, it was a long distance relationship. She was in Colorado at that time, and I was in California. So, you know, luckily I had the financial means to be able to visit and have her either fly out or me go out there maybe twice a month, but it still was very challenging. And one of the, you know, unique attributes was that my wife had 2 already children from her previous marriage.
Okay.
And so, you know, we had to ask, you know, unlike a normal relationship where you start courting and just moving deeper into conversation, we had to ask the tough questions right away. Once we knew that there was an interest, and once we knew this was a not just a weekend fling, we knew that this is a relationship that we wanted to start dating and really investing into. The 2 questions we asked, well, actually there was 3. Number 1 was, if one of us had to uproot the family, because her family is all in Colorado, her mom, her grandparents.
Okay.
My family is all in California. So it's not just uprooting the direct family, it's 2 or 3 generations now.
Yes.
So we had to ask, like, look, who's going to move? Because one of us will have to move at some point.
Yeah.
And the conversation ultimately came down to that she would come out to California because she knew that this is where my hustle was, right? My network, my businesses, my contacts were all in California. And that's very relevant. Obviously, again, I'm not saying money's the most important thing, but it is resources to be able to build and shelter your family. And so with the promise that I would obviously be able to fly her home whenever she wanted to, visit her family on holidays. We probably do maybe 3 or 4 trips to Colorado minimum a year. Mm-hmm. So with that promise, that was question number 1. Question number 2 was, you know, for me, this was more internal. Like, could I love these 2 daughters as if they were my own? And Mike, I know, again, we know each other a little bit and stuff like that, but like, I will never refer to my 2 older girls as stepdaughters.
Sure.
It's to me, it's a 100% commitment. These are my girls.
Sure.
The only thing that says otherwise is unfortunately like blood and DNA, but other than that, these are my girls.
Sure.
So I'll never refer to them as my stepdaughters. And the third question was basically like, hey, like, if we're going to do this, like, if the possibility comes up that I want to have more kids, are you open to that idea? And again, being my wife had her 2 older daughters, obviously at a younger age, she kind of felt like, hey, we could be empty nesters by the time we're in our upper 30s. You know what I mean? Our oldest daughter is now a senior in college. She's getting ready to graduate. Our second daughter is now a senior in high school that should be graduating hopefully virtually because of the whole coronavirus. But she should be graduating here in the next 2 or 3 months. We could have been empty nesters by the time we were 38, 39 years old. But did we really want to reset that clock? And we ultimately made that decision if we felt like it was the right thing in our lives and we truly felt like, you know, we wanted it more kids, that we would explore that option.
Yes.
So we dated. We had first 3 or 4 years, or first 3 years was long distance. And then eventually on the 3rd year, we got engaged. She moved out to California. My oldest daughters, again, my number 1 daughter, Morgan, started high school because we didn't want to move her in the middle of her high school career.
Sure.
So she started freshman year right in California. My youngest daughter, I think, was in the 5th grade, maybe 6th grade when she came out to California. And then about 2 years later is when we had my 3rd child, which was my son, Carter.
Yeah.
He's now 6. And then I had Avery 2 years or 3 years after that because we saw the dynamics between the two older girls.
Yes.
And Carter is amazing. He's such a mama's boy. The dynamic between a parent and a child is different from a sibling. It's
sure,
no matter
absolutely,
what.
yeah.
And we would see the two older girls playing, and we're like, man, we need Carter to have a friend.
Yeah.
You know? And so we made the decision. We're like, all right, well, we already reset the clock anyways.
Yeah. So to have another.
Yeah,
one.
to have another child, because now it's 18, 20 more years of supporting and raising a child, and it means obviously we're gonna probably be in our mid-50s before Carter leaves the nest. So
Sure.
we're like, whatever, we're not going to be young empty nesters. We're going to find our fulfillment in other places. And so we decided to have one more child, and that's our youngest daughter now, Avery, who's now 3.5. So family of 4, a wife, and 3 dogs.
And 3 dogs.
Heck yeah.
You know what, man? You brought up a couple of very, very important points. And what those are to me is the way that you approached this relationship, right? You said once you got to a point where you realized this was more than just a week, as you worded it, a weekend fling. But in other words, this is something to start taking seriously.
Absolutely.
You approached it with these very involved and large questions, because those are part of what you viewed as a necessity for longevity.
Absolutely.
For the potential for longevity. And that is vital, because a lot of people, I think, don't ask the hard questions. They don't even think to. It's more based on, vibe and passion and love, which is eerily similar to the way people approach business.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's kind of the tie that I'm making here, because, I feel very, very bad in a way for the younger generations, because we knew what life was like before even cordless landlines. Okay? I remember the first time I saw someone with a cordless landline, and I was like, oh, you're rich, right? Because I was like, I've never seen that before. And then obviously it turns into cell phones, and cell phones start to get, at one point they started getting smaller and smaller. Now they're bigger and bigger. But the point is without the internet, without cellular technology and all that, we grew up in a different era.
Heck yeah.
And to see now this younger generation who, you can hold a baby and they know how to swipe open an iPhone. It's unsettling. Right? It's totally unsettling. When I hold like a 9-month-old and they're already trying to take their tiny finger and unlock your phone if you happen to hold it up in front of them, it actually makes my skin crawl. And I have to check myself, because in one more generation, half generation, that is not something that I should allow to make my skin crawl, because that is normal to every sense of the word.
Sure.
So my point in bringing that up is I feel bad for them, because they are just... Everything moves 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yep.
And you are literally, as much as you allow yourself to let sounds and sights enter your eyes and your ears, you are overstimulated. And they are constantly being told that it's passion. It's just your passion. It's the word. That's the operative word, right? Find what you love. You'll never work a day in your life. That's passion.
Yeah.
Right? And so people take that. And whether it be business, and how we were just talking about relationships, I'm scared for them, because they believe that passion there's a thin line between passion being love passion, in love passion, and lust passion.
Sure.
Right? Passion is a large scale.
Yep.
And in relationships, people are basing everything on, the feeling, right? Everything's a feeling. And you watch too much Disney and you believe that life is a fairy tale. And if you are hit with the realization that you actually have to work very hard in a relationship, that is one that you're trying to have longevity in, I should say, that's why the divorce rate is 60% now. Okay? Because people don't know what to do with that, right? You have people who get married, right? And then they're like, when it doesn't work, they get a divorce, right? They don't go to counseling. One says I'll go to counseling, one says I won't, and you're already screwed, because the person who won't doesn't believe it's any of their fault, and that's all an indication of this very unrealistic foundation. People go into this entrepreneurial lifestyle because they believe it's all about finding something they're passionate about. That is very important. But the hard work is being completely glossed over. And it's the same thing in relationships, whether they be business, social, or spousal relationship.
Sure.
Yes, the passion is there. It needs to be there. Should be there. But the hard work trumps all, because that's where two people who are willing to work for it and for each other, that's where you can really build something.
Sure.
Right? And if you have a business that you're passionate about, but you're not willing to do the work, that's a very dangerous thing, because you end up putting it in the hands of someone who isn't passionate, and it's never going to go as well as if you did it yourself.
Sure.
Okay? So, I mean, we're getting to all of these points, and as we segue into business and how I believe that passion and the work ethic is applicable to all aspects of life, we're for the car guys, we're getting to the car, okay? There's going to be a whole lot of stuff. You guys, there's a real reason that wasn't in the beginning, because we're going to get to that. But, I mean, okay, so we've talked about the upcoming. We've talked about the faith, and then now the family, and let's get into the business, right?
Sure.
So forget the one that was taken from you. Forget the past. Let's talk about present, right?
Yeah.
How did you end up getting to this point now with your entrepreneurial ventures to be able to provide for the children, the wife, the children, and the lifestyle that you all choose to live?
Yeah. So I think, again, like I said, it all started by an accident and a happy opportunity. So, I mean, I do have to talk about the past. Not really like what got taken away, but just kind of the introduction of it all.
Sure.
My background and sort of quote unquote my passion in life was always as an artist, as a designer. And so, I did academically really well in high school. I got into basically virtually every college that my Korean American father wanted me to get into. He was the very quintessential tiger dad.
Sure.
He wanted the high SAT scores, the extracurriculars, the good GPA. And so I made a deal with my dad. I said, Dad, I want to go into the field of art and design. And of course, that's not exactly all that...
that is very much not what a stereotypical first-generation Asian father wants you to go into.
Exactly. Doctor, lawyer, something prestigious, something that they can brag about at their family dinners. And a starving artist was not one of them. Correct. But I told my dad, I said, Dad, if I do well in high school and get into the colleges that you theoretically would want me to go to, and if I also get into an art school, at that point, can I make my life decisions to do what I want to do? And he said that was the deal.
Okay.
So I did get into 4 out of the 5 major academic schools that my dad wanted me to get into.
Okay.
And then ultimately, I also got accepted to Art Center College of Design, and that's out in Pasadena. It's one of the top design schools in the nation.
Yes.
So I went there for illustration and ultimately entertainment design, because I wanted to go work for Hollywood. I'm a big Star Wars guy. I'm a big movie Disney guy, and I wanted to. At that time, I think George Lucas was doing his Star Wars prequel movies, and I thought to myself, what if? And I based it on the timing. I said, what if I can graduate college by 2003, and hopefully my dream job would have been like at ILM or whatever it is, and work on episode 3. And so, I had this goal and I did it. And during that time between 99 and 2003, I focused primarily on hand-drawn design. I was a 2D designer.
Yes.
I do everything traditional media. But the industry was shifting to 3D design.
Yes.
Now, obviously, the keenly aware artists knew that, and they were taking 3D software classes. But as a school, they weren't really preparing us. I mean, they weren't saying, hey, guys, you should be enrolling into computer software-aided design. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. They just continued to let us do what we were doing. And I graduated in 2003 when Warner Brothers was laying off their TV department. Disney was firing all their 2D artists and looking for 3D artists. DreamWorks was only looking for 3D artists. And so here I was with a massive, I'm talking like almost $160,000 student loan debt.
Sure.
I didn't come from a rich family, so I just pulled out student loans because my high school guidance counselor said, do what you love, follow that passion.
Okay.
And, the opportunity should line itself up. And it didn't work out that way.
Right.
Here I was doing what I thought I loved. And I still love art and design.
Yes.
$160,000 debt, 2003, and nobody wanted to hire my skill set.
Right.
And I was like, what the heck am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so I was introduced, and again, I know a lot of our callers are going to roll their eyes and cringe, but before you guys judge it, again, I was introduced to network marketing for the first time, again, about 17 years ago.
Network marketing, a.k.a. multi-level marketing.
Same thing.
A.k.a. the worst term is the pyramid scheme.
That's the way the cynics will look at it. Yes.
Fair enough.
So, truth be told, again, like I said, this is a profession that's been around for now 70 years. And again, I was just as skeptical as everybody else.
Sure.
I saw my parents struggle in Herbalife. I saw my parents trying to sell and air filters, water filters, you name it. They've tried it. And so, in my mind, I'm like, these things don't work. But again, I had a good buddy of mine who was, doing well. He was a self-made 6- and 7-figure income earner at the age of 22 years old. I said, And here I was obviously graduating from college, and I knew I had a bleak outlook on what I was going to do. And I said, what do you do? And he kind of explained what he did. And again, I was just kind of being an ass, and I'm like, oh my God, it's one of those things, right? And so he said one thing to me 17 years ago that literally changed my life. He said, Daniel, what are you so afraid of losing when you have nothing to lose?
Okay.
And it's kind of like J.K. Rowling has a quote. It says, when I hit rock bottom, I knew that the only place I could go is up. It's like that. It's like I knew financially, like, why was
you're at $160,000 in debt, can't get a job.
I was going to be bankrupt anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't change anything about myself or just the way I was going to do it, where was I going to go anyways?
Right.
I was heading like to a dead end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I said, he's absolutely right. I didn't want to admit it. I think that was my ego just fighting it. But I said, you know what? What's the worst that's going to happen? If it doesn't work, then I was right, and I was going to be broke anyways. But what if? See, too many times in life, we look at all the reasons why something might not work. Well, it might not work because of this. It might not work because of that. It might not work because of this. So we give 900 reasons why it's not going to work.
Yeah, man.
When sometimes you just need to look for the one reason why it's going to.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, you know what? I feel like there's 99 reasons why this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to be right. But what if this works for me? And I did it. And 17 years later, again, I've been in 4 different companies. I've been a number 1 income earner and top 2-3% of income earners in 4 different companies. So it's not like lightning striking once.
Sure.
I mean, I'm talking about 4 times, you know?
Yes.
But more importantly, because of my design background, I actually began to consult with even corporate companies, not only doing the design aspect. So I have a lot of my clients on the design side. I do branding work and market strategy and campaigns for large direct selling companies.
Sure, I'm familiar with a couple of them.
Yeah. So I do branding work. And again, one of the clients that I had was a $13 million company. I did a major rebrand for them, and they went from $13 million to almost $100 million in about 3 years. Not saying it's all what I did at all.
No, but sure. You were part of that change for them.
Yeah, and so a lot of other companies would ask, like, okay, so who did your work? And then I would get referrals. And so here I had parallel businesses. So I have a company called Evoke, where we continue to do brand and marketing and design solutions for clients, a lot of startups, but also a lot of direct selling companies.
Sure.
So I help on the design corporate side, but then I also straddle on one side as a distributor. So imagine like me being able to design my own systems and marketing tools for the company, and then using the tools that I designed because I know it, and then building a sales force and an organization. So again, I understand that a lot of people have like their qualms and their skepticisms about the industry. And don't get me wrong, I look at the profession, and there are a lot of bad, just really egregious companies out there.
Yeah, the companies that gave that stereotype reality.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, I mean, because of regulators and lawmakers and different things like that, it is much harder to get away with bogus, just snake oil and just these borderline scams. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's far less prevalent, but it still exists today.
Sure.
And so again, to the consumer, to the listener, again, like I'm saying all companies are great, all, whatever. You got to do your due diligence. You know what I mean? So
you're saying if somebody approached someone with what would be classified as a pyramid setup, right, to not immediately shoot them out of the sky.
Yeah, I mean, especially because you look at commonalities, right? We live in what we call a gig economy culture now. Okay? Like, imagine, Mike, like when my grandparents were around, again, my grandfather worked. His income was enough to provide for my grandmother, his 7 children, and he was the sole breadwinner. My grandmother was a full-time stay-at-home homemaker. Which, by the way, in generations past, and even just 4 months ago, you would have looked at a stay-at-home wife and just like rolled your eyes and say, that's not a real career. But I think a lot of parents are finding out through the quarantine that stay-at-home moms are pretty badass. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, the amount of things that a mother, even the ones that aren't necessarily just stay-at-home, but a mother's responsibility in taking care of the children and running a household.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even really understand how that ever was underrated.
Yeah.
It's massive, man.
Yeah.
They keep the house together.
Heck yeah.
So, I mean, okay, so we've touched on the network marketing.
Yeah.
We've touched on how you were able to, in 4 different companies, become top 3% on all 4.
Yeah.
And that has created for you I mean, it's all relative, of course.
Sure.
But to the layman, to the average person, I mean, there is a solid amount of financial success that you've had.
Sure.
Okay? That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
You're not braggadocious. We're not here talking about numbers, but it has provided the ability to have a beautiful home.
Yeah.
And space for the family, the dogs, and the cars, right?
Yeah.
And the cars that I'm surrounded by a few of them.
I wish the podcast listeners can see this because I know it's an audio-based platform, but we are literally, I mean, obviously, me and Mike, obviously, we're practicing social distancing, right? We have our setup that's working for this podcast.
Correct.
We agreed to do the podcast in the garage so that the family members are not interacting.
Correct. And we're spaced apart.
Yeah.
You know, you have to make do with the circumstances, but still abide to keep, you know, the podcast going.
Yeah. But funny enough, as car enthusiasts, which you are a legend in that profession.
Oh, wow. I appreciate you.
I mean, it's kind of cool to kind of do it in the garage, right?
It very much is.
How fitting, right?
It is. You know, and you guys, so I appreciate Daniel saying something like that because, you know what? My first, let's get, you know, that's a great way to get into that. I refuse to take the word legend. I think legend is more, should be reserved for people who have unfortunately passed away. Let's use
living legend.
Okay, thank you. But you know what, you guys. My first introduction to Daniel. We're acquainted very personally now. We have a ridiculous amount of mutual friends and acquaintances within the industry and socially. So now, in this present day, our relationship is far different than when I first was introduced to his name. I actually ended up writing. Right? That was the first time I heard of Daniel, and what he was into and what he came up with was your FRS build. Right? I wrote your feature in Import Tuner.
Yep.
Import Tuner magazine in what year was it?
I want to say, was it 2012?
Okay, that sounds about right.
It's the first year that FRS launched.
Yes.
And I see you, Mike, you're like eyeing over my shoulder looking at the wall plaque.
I saw it. So you guys, when we're here in the garage, Daniel, who's had you know, a fair amount of builds leading up to now, and we'll talk about the ones he has now, but, you know, there's plaques from a few different magazines, but the one that caught my eye was a plaque on the wall of the garage for Import Tuner magazine, and it was his 2013 FRS, so it would have been 12.
Oh, yeah.
Would have been 12, and I remember having to interview you via email.
Yeah.
Right? And anyways, I looked at the build and what it was, especially for the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is kind of dope. You know, because when you are a freelancer and a journalist and you write for various magazines, there are going to be builds that you don't really sit well with you.
Sure.
Right? Or they're just not your style.
Of course.
But that's not my job. My job is to take the story and the vehicle and present it, right?
Yeah.
In a story form. But when you like the car, when it resonates with something that you may have done yourself, it was that much more fluid and easy for me to write your feature.
Sure.
And it was great. I remember the whole tuner challenge.
Yeah.
Right, SEMA.
Yeah.
And being able to see it come out in print. It was a crazy car, man. It was a really crazy car. So that's when I met Daniel. So we're talking about eight years ago.
Yeah.
And then over time, it's turned into us having a whole lot of mutual acquaintances.
That's right.
And builds that kind of tie us together. So let's talk about, well, that was the FRS. So let's lead up. You had the FRS. The feature in Import Tuner was called Black Beauty. And then Scion Tuner Challenge. I don't even remember. What place did you get?
I got third.
Third, right?
Yeah,
That year was
controversial, but third.
It was super controversial,
Yeah.
right? I actually remember how that was weird because yours was fairly elaborate compared to at least one of the other competitors.
Sure.
Right? But it could have been maybe just a black on black.
Yeah.
Maybe it was too understated, right? Maybe they didn't really understand what to do with it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? But okay, fine. It was third, right?
Yeah.
But you got the FRS, you built something crazy, and then you had the subsequent fame, if you will, that comes with a build that makes it to that kind of level.
Sure.
Right? And before that, you had already been doing it.
Yeah.
But that's sort of, SEMA and competing in a national competition that's, televised and covered, that's sort of a kind of a new tier.
Yeah.
Okay, and then from that point, right?
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about what you've done since then.
Yeah. So again, I think the FRS gave me a chance to kind of get back into the car building scene and the tuner scene, right? I started back when I was in college. I had a Honda Civic SI, 99 SI, which ultimately starred in the Fast and the Furious, that prequel, that Prelude movie, that small 10-minute movie about Paul Walker, how he gets from LA to Miami.
So to answer the question literally, I do not know. And the reason why I do not know is only a few people know this, but I actually watched the Fast and the Furious 1 in the movie theater. And I remember, I was already a car guy at that young age. I went to the movies. I watched that movie, and I was entertained to a certain degree. I was also just like, there was a lot of bullshit in that, but I was entertained. But what really drove it home was when I left the theater, the straight foolishness that immediately had started occurring. I remember I was a teenager leaving the movie theater, and people were who had gone there in their mom's Previa van, were peeling out of the parking lot.
That's right.
And I remember realizing, oh, this is how it's going to be all the time now. Right? And I was so put off. As a car guy, it's not like I got put off from cars. I got put off by what that movie had already done within minutes, that I actually internally boycotted the movies. And I did not watch anything related to the Fast and the Furious until 7. I was strict with it. So people always make references, the whole Motec exhaust spoon engine thing or whatever. And there was a time where I didn't even know what people were talking about. I was already starting to have my cars featured in magazines. My car was featured in, my first one was 08, but around the same time as I was writing for Importuner, my car came out on the cover of Honda Tuning in 2012. The same year. So I'm already a figurehead to some people, and they would make jokes or references, and I looked at them blankly.
That's
and they
so
were
funny.
Everyone around me was like, you don't understand. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. To this day, someone did some comment last week, something about Gallo 12 and Gallo 24. and I commented back, I'm like, I don't know what that means. And people were like, what? I had no idea in 2020 what that reference meant.
Dude, you got some time under the quarantine, man. You got to get back.
I refuse.
You can hate it, but
I should watch it.
It's cultural relevance, right? Just for discussion.
The first one was about the only thing that was relevant to real life. Well, okay, there's Hollywood culture and then there's real culture. But my point is...
suspended disbelief.
Okay, fair enough, right? So that's just to kind of give some context when someone says, what do you mean he hasn't seen it? He's a car guy. You guys, I'm a hard through and through car guy.
That's right.
And I did not watch 6 of them in a row.
In
a row. You know how many years that was? I would not even allow... I used to hear the word furious in a different context, and I wanted to throw myself over it. I was like, I hate this. But, okay. But anyways, my friend. Okay, so Paul Walker prequel, your SI was in that.
And then so after that, I kind of... Again, that's when I started my entrepreneur journey. So I put cars aside. Now, I was still purchasing and acquiring cars. I still built stuff, but it was all personal. It was more like an OEM plus, personal enjoyment. And it wasn't until the FRS Tuner Challenge where I was asked by Scion to build for the West Coast. That kind of got me back into it, and it got me hooked. And I just said, why did I stop? This is what I enjoy. I have a competitive spirit in me. Obviously, again, that contest didn't go too well in terms of placement, but I think the reception was great.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? So,
yeah.
So that then turned me on and said, you know what? Again, I have the fortunate privilege to be able to enjoy real wide dynamics of cars. Right?
Yes.
I mean, exotic cars, including McLarens and Lamborghinis and Porsches. I've rotate through cars fairly quickly every 6 to 8 months, maybe 1 year. I joke, my wife jokes around, she's like, I don't think you've paid an annual registration on any of your cars. By the time the registration letter comes in from California, the car is sold, I'm moving on to the next deal.
Yes.
So I've picked up and curated a collection that ranged from, again, supercars, as well as there was a time early last year that I had a S2000 CR sitting in the garage. It was one of just 40 that were in white, and then I had a Type R Integra. And I was searching for an elusive white NSX to kind of complete the white trifecta. Couldn't find it. I got frustrated, so I sold the CR and the ITR. And then so I think after the Scion, chronologically, I picked up the Datsun. I picked up the 240Z. I had seen the car, and again, it was timeless. It was beautiful. It was very reminiscent of old school racing Jaguars, and just had this beautiful look to it.
It's very much timeless.
And I said, you know what? this would be my first like sort of dive into vintage cars. Let's try it. So I found a good chassis. We started doing it, and I did all the work locally between myself and one of my friends who runs a personal company called Pigment. They do body work and paint. And so, we got together. We my wife actually helps out. She actually wrenches on cars too. And so we stripped and sort of deconstructed the car, prepped the body. They painted it, brought it back to my house. We started doing light exterior assembly, and then that's right around the time my son was born.
Okay.
And keep in mind, now this is about 1 year into the project. It was a slow project. There was no rush.
Sure.
And then my son was born and my business was booming, and so I could not give the attention to the Z. So it was literally sitting on jack stands, freshly painted, under a cover for almost 1 year. I mean, literally, we were just kind of storing stuff on top of the car.
Sure.
And it was around that time I said, you know what, I got to explore someone to finish off this project, you know what I mean? And so, I'm not going to say the name, but I met with a different vendor, a famous company, a tuning company, and they wanted to do when we sat down and started talking, he would kind of talk over me, and he's like, we should do this, and we should do that, and we should do this.
Not listening to what you wanted.
Yeah, so it wasn't not even about, hey, as a client, what do you want? He was, and again, don't get me wrong, he's probably an expert at what he does.
Sure.
But it was definitely missing the mark. And so I politely walked away from that meeting and just ended up not utilizing them.
Sure.
I started seeing, of course, Eric and the JDM Legends guy, Josh and those guys.
Yeah.
That same year, they had brought this beautiful blue Z out to JCCS.
Yes.
And I saw that my buddy Antonio took some photos and sent it to me. I was like, this is it.
Sure.
These guys have that right balance between obviously some modern mechanics and parts, but primarily keeping that old
Staying
spirit.
true to the old school, yeah.
And it's crazy when two white dudes are the most like hardcore JDM enthusiasts. These guys are walking encyclopedia of vintage Japanese cars.
Yes, they are.
It's like so freaking weird. And so I reached out to Eric and I said, Eric, do you mind stopping by my place after JCCS next year? So Eric said, sure. He made time. He came over. I mean, we had done some FaceTime discussions and stuff like that, but he ultimately decided to pick up the project. So he trailered the car home right after JCCS. The car was out in Utah for another year.
Yes.
And they took over from bodywork on, they took over. Now, funny story, we were about 60% done with the car build, and then Eric calls me and goes, hey, I got some good and bad news. I said, what's the good news? He said, we're about 60% done. I said, great. He said, what's the bad news? He said, hey, Velocity approached us. They want to do a TV show.
Yeah.
Your car would be the pilot, but in order to film it, we got to take everything back off the car.
Yeah.
So it was both a good and, I mean, getting magazine features is great, but I think being like featured on a TV show is awesome. So I said, sure, let's do it. We're already 3 years in. What does it hurt to wait another couple more months? And so ultimately the car got filmed for the pilot premiere episode of JDM Legends.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, over that year and a half that the car was there, I just built a great friendship. What started off originally as just a vendor, Eric, Josh, and Mauricio over there.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are some of the nicest guys you'll ever
meet. Yeah, man, all three of them I consider friends, good guys.
So down to earth. I mean, we just have great conversations. Anytime they're in California, we have meals together. Anytime I'm out there, we'll grab a bite to eat. I mean, it's just, these are just...
They're nice people.
They're just nice people. And I was told, Eric, the best thing I got out of the Z project was not the Z, it's the friendship. And I know that sounds corny, but it's so true.
No, man, it's not corny, Daniel. It's not. I mean, their Blue Z is obviously probably, I guess it would be fair to say, because it came out first.
Yeah.
Their most famous Z. But now in present day, especially because of the show, the white one, your white one, is pretty much like the poster child for Z's in that sense.
Sure.
Especially with JDM Legends. Being able to end up the timing working out, albeit to cause disassembly to reassemble. But it was really cool to see it, man. And I mean, that show was well received. There was actually a few circumstances, most of which are public and some of which are not, that led to why it didn't end up coming back.
Sure.
Some of which had nothing to do with them. There was a storm of just colliding circumstances and factors, and I felt really bad because that was a really fantastic show that would have been in the forefront of being able to show that section of the automotive import culture.
It was like, honestly, what really saddens me is, number one, obviously the guys behind, in front of the camera are just great people. And I know Eric and Josh said it from the beginning. They don't want this to be a typical like throwing chairs and fake drama
Correct.
and whatever.
Correct, yeah.
They didn't want to be just like clowns, right? And we see a lot of those shows, you know?
Yeah, Josh and I talked about it. He was like, if they told me, can you just act up more? He'd be like, no.
No, yeah.
Right, that's it.
Screw that.
Because this is who I am.
And I felt like it was one of the shows that really gave people a genuine look into passionate automotive building. And it's just super unfortunate that just there's so many politics and just complexities that go beyond the talent.
They do. It goes very much beyond the talent. I mean, the problem is that when you speak softly and in a calm manner, it comes across as monotone and boring in a television setting.
Sure.
Okay? And it's not boring. It's just not exaggerated.
Sure.
Right? People act like living cartoon characters. Okay? And that's how you entertain people.
Yeah.
Look at some of these YouTubers, which are in their own right basically as famous or even more famous than some TV stars.
Yeah.
They act like cartoon characters.
Yeah.
People are not being calm and soft-spoken are both beautiful things until people want to look at you or watch you, and now they're bored.
Yeah,
which is sad, you know.
Yeah.
But we get to the point where you've got the FRS, SEMA, Tuner Challenge, and a pretty solid amount of accolades. You know, I got to write the feature Import Tuner. Then you have the SIs and the Prelude movie to F&F, and then you end up having the Z. All of the years that went into it, JDM Legends. You had in between all that, you had the white CR S2000, one of 40.
Yeah.
You had the white ITR.
Yep.
And you were looking for the white NSX.
Yep.
So for those of you who are like, wait, what? Yes, there is a certain amount of monetary necessity to be able to gather these things.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. You worked for that.
No, absolutely.
And then you created the ability for you to buy not just one or two, but a lot of these things that are what you've always wanted, right?
Yeah.
And so you cycle through them, which I would personally say that you should have just kept every last one of them.
I wish, but space is obviously
yeah. But okay, you guys. So this is some of the stuff he's had, and the Z, amongst all the cars that you've cycled through, is the Z a keeper? Or is it just like anything, if the right person, not just about money, but about the love for it, were to come along, you would be open to letting it go?
I would be. When I had the conversations with the guys at JDM about what would be the conditions in which I would ever sell the Z. Number one would be if there was any dire financial reasons where this car had to be liquidated to take care of my family.
Absolutely.
The car is not more important than my family's well-being. That would be number one. Number two would be if I have ever had an opportunity to build a 432.
Okay.
So Eric has one sitting at JDM Legends, and we're
does.
trying to figure out something here. Like, I would not mind giving up what I consider to be, again, like I said, I know I'm biased, but arguably one of the best Zs in the nation right now. I would sell it in a heartbeat to fund a new restoration on a 432.
On a 432.
Yeah. That would be the second reason. And the third reason is, again, like any business person, again, as much as I'm passionately in love with this car, probably the most sentimental car I've owned. If a person came along with a big enough checkbook and a reason why they want the car, again, the number has to make sense, but the ownership has to make sense too. You know what I mean? And you could tell that the Z was going to go to another enthusiast's home, somebody who loved and really wanted this in their collection. Then yeah, I would definitely consider selling it. You know what I mean? But I don't openly post and say, obviously, again, when I rotate through cars, I'll post it on Instagram or I'll post it on Facebook. The Z is one that I have not yet had the heart to do yet. I won't ever. But there are people that will message. They're like, "Hey, I see you're selling this."
But they're like, "I'll give you $25,000 for it."
Because
you're just like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, they have no idea the investment that went into building the car to this level. I think most people think $20,000-$30,000 will build a Z like this, and it won't. I mean, I'm into the car probably 75 plus 80,000, and even Eric is like, we can't replicate this build for that amount right now, anyways.
Right.
So it is what it is. I mean, so I don't foresee it going on the chopping block anytime soon.
Look, man, I want to have you repeat that one more time.
Yeah.
Okay. We were talking about a 70s Datsun.
Yeah.
And you said that you believe you have put in how much to make it what it is.
About 70 to 75,000.
Okay, and you guys, the only reason why I have him state that again is so that you have an understanding. When you look at the Z, for those of you that already know the car I'm talking about, maybe that number doesn't really do much to you because you already kind of figured it out. Or for those of you that may look it up, I want you to look it up. Daniel Song Datsun, and it's going to come up. There's just an absolute massive amount of photos and features that were done on it. You guys may look at it and you'll see wheels and flares.
Yeah.
That is literally what you might look at. Oh, that is a really crispy white Z that has TEs. And you're going to be like 75. You guys, it goes far beyond that. Like the Z that I did, like the cars that I've done. Sometimes it's fun to build them in a way where they don't look like much work was done.
No, yeah.
Right? Now, we're going to go ahead and now segue. I mean, we got the Lotus and other cars to talk about. But let's just jump from cars that a lot of work's done to make it look like not a lot of work was done. And then let's go ahead and talk about cars that very much look like a hell of a lot of work was done. Okay? And that would be the Supra.
Yep.
Okay? And before we even get into this damn build, the first one you have that's not white, by the way.
Yep.
Okay, before we even get into that, and how you were talking about getting like new things, and you were like, well, the only way to really do that is to build another Supra.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this one, right?
Okay.
So the SEMA happened once, 2012, 13, excuse me.
Yeah, 2013.
Right, and now here we are back again. This past SEMA, you bring out the new Supra.
Yeah.
And in the, well, not a sea of. Maybe this next one, the next two SEMAs will be the sea of. This was the first SEMA.
Yeah.
There was still a pretty solid amount of them.
Oh, yeah.
But yours stood out amongst the other, 11 to 12 very similar and about 30 generally similar styles of Supras.
Yeah.
Yours stood out. And let's talk about what creative and artistic angle you guys went into this one.
So, obviously I had an opportunity. Stan Chen over at Toyo Tires said, we pitched the idea because I knew I had an early allocation. I put my name on a list a long time ago to get the A90. And, I got the call from Toyota and said, hey, you're going to be number 4 in California. Okay. Now, again, that's outside of the corporate members taking delivery of their launch vehicle.
Sure.
So, again, I had an opportunity to pick up basically one of the first, obviously, consumer cars, and the first in Turbulence Gray. And so, I had immediately reached out to Stan. I said, Stan, look, I'm going to take an early delivery of a Supra. It's probably one of the earliest here. Would you want a Supra in the Tread Pass? And obviously in the last 3 or 4 years, the Tread Pass is pretty much the hottest area to get into in SEMA.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stan's done a really great job making this outside be an attraction that people are literally going to go through Central, all the way down to the end of Central, and cut through just to go see the Tread Pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when he gave us the green light, I had a build partner on this project just because I knew the timeline was going to be really aggressive. Again, there were some issues with the West Coast cars and when we got delivery. So I had a build partner. His name is Johnny Grunwald. He built that FD, the RXA. He's done a lot of collabs. And so Johnny's a teammate of mine. So I said, hey, Johnny, I got this A90. I need you to help me out because he's got contacts everywhere.
Sure.
Now, again, I'll go to a local tuning shop and say, I need to order an aero kit. I need to order an exhaust. And if it's ready, of course, you might wait and get the part and then install it. But I don't have the luxury of time. I had 41 days to build a car for
People
the Tread
do not
Pass.
understand that.
Yeah. And so I said, Johnny, I need you to bust down doors and get me contacts. And Johnny had them because he had done this for years. He has certain contacts that I just didn't have.
For sure.
And so, Johnny had become a build partner and collaborator on this project. And so, again, I had a vision for the car. I knew what I wanted to do. I know the first more controversial topic is why so many Pandem Supra wide bodies? I mean, people were tired of the car before it even unveiled.
Sure.
I think number one, that is the age of social media where everyone just kind of shares everything.
Yes,
and
everything.
So, and if you think about it, 11 cars in a sea of thousands of cars nation and worldwide is not a lot.
Correct.
But in the eyes of Instagrammers, when you have major influencers pushing the same Pandem kit, 10 is all it takes for it to be played out.
Yeah, especially in a subsection of the automotive culture.
Yeah.
It's just everyone's just nonstop all day. Pandem 1, 1.5, 1, 1.5,
Exactly.
wing, no wing, molded, not molded, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I get it.
So the big thing for us was, number one, is we had to be able to depend on the fact that we were going to get this stuff in time.
Yeah.
Pandem was at the time the only production ready wide body kit. And even that took time to build because they're built to order and then air freight over from Japan. So that was number one, reliability of timeliness. The only other really wide body that was there other than the Pandem kit was TJ Hunt's kit. And I mean, TJ Hunt's he's got millions of viewers on YouTube. He's got leverage that nobody else really has. I'm not going to have that. No one's going to build a one-off kit for me. You know what I mean? So we went with what we knew was going to be reliable. Now, that being said, I don't think the Pandem kit looks all that bad. Now, again, we're going to go through an iteration of the car later on, but we did the Pandem kit. We went with the 1.5 because I think out of the 11, like 9 of them were all the 1.1
Correct.
or the 1.0, which is the
yeah.
big sort of combat-looking rear
wing.
Yeah,
the rear wing is what really separates it.
Yeah. So I mean, there was only 2, if not 3, cars that ran the same GT wing as my car. But where we really, and this is, again, not the most obvious thing, but where we really wanted to separate our build was in the craftsmanship of the build, right?
Yes.
Because, look, SEMA cars, I mean, I think for 80% of car builders, they just already see it as a prestigious thing. Your car was in SEMA? Oh, man. But it isn't a blanket thing because, I mean, there are vloggers, there are Instagrammers that devote their time to exposing the crappy builds that show up to SEMA.
There are a lot.
There are a lot.
Yes.
Duct tape and overspray and just a lot of just junky, janky builds, right? And they show up at SEMA. It may look good in a YouTube video. It may look good in a photo. Yep. But it's, I mean, up close, it is nothing.
Any real car builder is like, this is trash.
Yeah, exactly. And so we said, hey, like, let's not cut any corners. You know what I mean? And so, again, I enrolled the help of my guy Tuan and Vu from Pigment again. I mean, these guys are RTs by day, but they build cars on the side.
Yeah.
And they had their hands on some of all the hottest Supras out of SoCal. Tuan and Vu have had their hand on a lot of these cars. So they started building, they started working on it. Again, the primary thing is we ditched, again, all the rubber welting. Like, rubber welting is like a way for you to hide panel gaps.
It is. It really is.
It's functional. It is what it is. I'm not knocking it. Look, I think there's a time and place for welting. I mean, there's OEM panels. Like, I mean, when you look at Integra Type Rs, they have like OEM plus kits that have the welting on it. CR has that on the front lip. So I'm not knocking the welting. But also a lot of people are doing it because then they don't have to reshape or glass or sand the wide body flares and the panels that go onto the car.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a difference between what makes something good and what makes something great.
Exactly. So we ditched all the included hardware for nicer stainless button heads. Again, I was very particular about the size of the hardware because, again, some people are going with almost like nickel size or dime size like button heads, and it's just gross in my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah, so little things like that. We made sure the alignment of the kit was absolutely just dead on. I mean, we spent a lot. I would say 70-80% of the time was spent on just the bodywork alone.
No, but dude, that what made look like he just put flares on the body.
Yeah.
The people who understand, regardless of it being a renowned Japanese company, you're not going to walk this flare and have it just match the shape perfectly. That's just not reality.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you guys, I'm gonna let Daniel, continue on this description of the Supra. But whether it be the Z that we talked about or not, I always encourage you guys, right? Whether it be during or after, you need to look up. Don't just listen to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
See it for yourself. Google it. You can check him out on Instagram. I'll put him in the captions. You guys, it behooves you to look at and study what we're talking about so that you're not just taking ours or anyone's word for it. You're able to see it for yourself. Many of you saw the coverage, obviously, of SEMA and this, turbulence gray Supra that was in the tread pass. And some of you who, I heard about that. I don't really remember. What do you mean kit with no welting? It would just be something that would go right over your head.
Yeah.
It's a wide body. And it's a Pandem. He doesn't have the crazy duck bill in the back. No. There's more, much more to this particular build, and one of those things is the fitment, which really made it stand out to those with a discerning eye.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I think there's a big difference between the fanatical YouTube fans that just automatically assume this is my favorite YouTube star, therefore they can do no wrong.
They can do no wrong.
Versus a genuine builder that can come up in person and say, look, I've noticed missing button heads. I've noticed panel gaps, and your car doesn't have that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Is it perfect? No, of course not. Is it better than the 10 or 11?
Sure.
It's arguable, but it's there. And again, that was what we wanted. I wanted to make sure the car was well executed. I knew I couldn't separate myself on the aero because it is what it is. But I knew I could separate myself on the quality of the build. I mean, we're not going to hack up. Obviously, that the painful process is you got to cut the body.
A brand new car.
Yeah, and so my car had 16 miles on it when we were using a cutter to cut away OEM fenders. It's a painful. I mean, like I went from brand new car to salvage title.
To salvage title instantly.
Yeah, in 16 miles, right? And so, but you have people that will just jam like foam filler into the open cavities of the cut areas. We welded sheet metal. We closed it up. I mean, if I pull off the rear filler, it looks like an OEM radius. So the crazy thing, Mike, after we fitted the panel in the kit, we pulled it all off.
Okay.
And I drove from obviously where we were working on the car to like performance shops to get like the turbo installed, the exhaust installed. There were people standing next to me at gas pumps talking about my car, not realizing the car was cut up.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, again, you step back and then you can see the holes where the button heads were going, the thread certs and stuff like that. But in general, it wasn't, again, I'm not going to say who, but if you look at some of these YouTube stars, when they're pulling their kits off to work on their cars and it shows up on, look how it looks like a dog chewed up their fenders.
Oh, dude, let's... It really does, man. It really, because they're taking a Sawzall, they're taking a Dremel, and they're just going at it, and I get it, but that's the difference, man, is that for people with a level of detail and a certain amount of self-respect, right? It isn't just about what's on the outside of what everyone can see.
Yeah.
It's about what's underneath.
Sure.
You disassemble any one of our cars, and it looks just as good underneath major panels or the dashboard or under the carpet as it does anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And that's a statement for people who have class, and you want to build something with detail, and so it's great that we're talking about this, but you guys, I know you heard me mention TEs on the Datsun, right? So we for those of you who are going to look up Daniel's collection, you'll be able to find the pictures of the various builds. The one thing that he's carried on through every single one of the cars that he's had and no longer has is that you have run TE37s of some version, right? Whether it be Vs on the Datsun or whether it be the new Ultras, right?
Yeah.
You have run TEs on how many cars?
I would say maybe 5 or 6 of the builds have run TEs.
Oh, and that's what you put on there and you kept them.
Yep.
Like you had TEs on the Lotus.
I had Sonics.
I remember those.
Yeah, I had TE Sonics on the Lotus because again, the new Sonics were given like deeper concave faces. So again, when I was first introduced to Lotus, at the time you could do face 1.
Yes.
Which, no offense,
it's just not concave. Yeah.
But again, when the Sonics came out, and again, I know some people dislike the Sonics because of certain reasons, but it gave an opportunity for smaller cars. I wasn't going to run oversized wheels or anything like that, but I could do Sonics on the Exige and still do concave faces and that.
Yeah.
No,
it was a great look.
Yeah.
Right? It was a great look. But I mean, the Lotus is up for sale, right?
Yeah, actually, funny enough, the delivery of the car should actually happen this week. The buyer,
so it's solid, done.
It's
Lotus
done and
is gone.
sold. Yeah, and that's it's a 1 of 4 car. It's the lowest mileage Exige Roger Becker edition in the U.S., if not the world.
If not the world.
Yeah.
And did you get what you believed it was worth?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Yeah, I mean, considering
but
that...
it wasn't a lowball.
No. I mean, considering that literally as the deal was being negotiated, the coronavirus situation happened, and I mean, all car markets have gone soft. I mean, we knew recession was already... I mean, like, I have friends that, for example, were looking at auctions at Amelia Island.
Yes.
And the brochures show estimated selling prices.
Yes.
Every car, when the gavel fell, every car sold for less than the minimum price.
Yes.
A McLaren Senna, all carbon edition, sold I think for like $800,000. It couldn't even clear $1 million. And that was
Senna.
Yeah, a McLaren Senna. And you're talking about cars before even the coronavirus hit. So one, the writing was on the wall that we're kind of heading towards a recession. So again, I think a lot of the buyers were getting a little conservative. So when you have a niche brand like Lotus, and then that's like the 1%ers that are looking for a car like this, then within the 1%er, you're talking about one of the highest priced Lotuses because of the rarity. I'm looking for essentially the 1% of the 1% buyers.
Absolutely.
So they're not going to come along very frequently.
For sure.
Yeah. And so
you have the ability to wait.
I do. I could have weathered the storm. But again, like I said, I have other projects that I would like to fund. I have other things that I wanted to do with liquidity. So again, a good opportunity came up. Buyer made an original offer. Coronavirus happened. He's a dentist, so he closed up 3 offices for temporarily. So he then pulled back on the deal.
Okay.
But then the resistance and the desire for the car was too strong. So then he came back with a counter offer, which was a little less. But I figured, you know what? Given the current climate and economy,
he could have just never come back.
Yeah, exactly. So my choice was to sit on the car for foresee. See, like most people, they understand the length, possible estimated length of the impact of the health side of coronavirus. But what a lot of people don't understand is the economic impact. Economic
outcome is
not
good.
We might be back to normal within optimistically 2 to 6 months with the coronavirus from a health impact. Yeah.
Economically,
you're talking 2 to 3 years.
Exactly.
And that's optimistically speaking,
man.
2 to 3 years. And so that being said, I mean, this car may be, if I weather the storm, I may not find a ready, hungry buyer for another 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
And so to take a couple $1,000 loss on that original deal to make sure the car just leaves, I think it was a fair ask.
Well, loss to the number that you wanted.
To the one I
Definitely not a loss as far as
what I acquired it for.
What you acquired it for and how it appreciated under your care.
Yep.
So the Lotus is going, right? You guys, for those of you who can't see, which is, well, everyone, the Lotus is sitting underneath the Z. He's got a lift within the garage, and we are sandwiched between the Z, the Lotus, and the Supra. And as a car guy, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now. Okay? So it's a beautiful thing. You get to see plaques on the wall. You've got the Tesla outside, the Tesla electric car for the kids.
Yep.
Right? It's a really beautiful thing, you guys. You were talking about money. You said money's not everything, but it's a resource, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that I have always wanted to really drive home for people is that there's a very, very big difference between caring about money and caring about what you can do with money.
Yeah.
Okay? Money is literally just a piece of paper.
Yep.
Okay? And there was a time when it was, the saying goes, worth your weight in gold. Money did used to be literally worth its weight in gold. So if you wanted to have tangible versus tangible, that existed.
Yep.
That entire monetary system is gone.
Sure.
Okay? Money, 10 world banks that wake up in the morning and decide what our currencies are worth against each other.
Yeah.
And you could wake up one morning and for macroeconomic reasons that no one really understands except them, all your liquid could be worth shit.
Yep.
Okay? So that might be way too complex for a lot of people, but a lot of people, what I'm trying to say is, he was talking about wind and sail. Okay, we can't control the wind, but you can decide when to hoist the sail, when to harness the wind, when to take the sail down, and just allow other factors to come into play. There are things that you have to understand that we don't have anything to do with.
Yeah.
And what you have to remember is money is useless. Money is simply a means.
Yep.
Okay, it is a means to feed yourself. It is a means to clothe yourself. It is a means to invest. It is a means to buy things. But it is a means. It is not the object or the number.
Yep.
Okay, it's what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
What can you do? And if you don't have any money, you can't do too many things.
Sure.
Okay, and it's a really important thing. I mean, most of the time, coming from someone who has a lot of money is the argument that I hear.
Yeah.
Well, that person is successful. That person is secure. So they can say that.
Yeah.
I am in an entirely, just to put it in a realistic perspective, I'm in an entirely different tax bracket than you. And just due to the way that my life as an individual, as Big Mike, as a human being, economically, I've been hit. I can't say as hard as many other people.
Sure.
But very hard.
Yep.
Okay? Personally, guys, putting some of my personal information out there. And I'm a person who does not have a lot of money, at least relative to who I'm talking with. And that's not something to be ashamed of. There's different setups, there's different phases in life and growth periods, etc. The point is, it's not just someone who has a lot of money who can say that. It's how you view money. You can have a lot of it and still not care about it. You only care about what you can do with it.
That's right.
Okay? And someone who, there are people, who have not very much, but they go around acting like they have it all. And that's where they're missing the damn point.
Sure.
Okay? So you guys, talking about his business, talking about cars, we can do a lot of that. But I really want you to take some time, right? I always encourage you guys. Many of the listeners, they take notes, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
And they'll DM me. Some of them DM me mid podcast.
Okay.
I'm listening to it right now. You dropped it 5 hours ago, 2 hours ago, and what is this, or what did you mean here? Right?
Yeah.
They're very in tune to it.
Heck yeah.
And then other people after, right? A day or two, whenever they get around to listening to their subscribe, download, and sometimes a month later, some new person finds it. But you guys, I'll put Daniel's information. Take the time to look at the builds. Google them. You can see the Supra. You can see the Z. You'll see the Lotus. You'll see everything. And it just gives you an example for all of my car guys who are like, did he say S2000 CR, ITR, SI, Supra, Lotus Exige? Did he say Datsun? Yes, every one of those and more. There's other ones on the wall, FRS before. You guys, there's something to be said about someone who's been able to get to a certain point and it still tells you the first thing that they consider to be the most important is faith and then family. And everything else is third to that, right? And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why we get along so well.
Yeah.
Because I feel like from an ethical, moral, and just as a human standpoint, I resonate with you and vice versa.
Yeah.
Getting to know you via email when it was the FRS 8 years ago, that's very different.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, he can actually produce proper sentences and he's answering me grammatically, intelligently, right? That's about all I could deduce, and then I could see the build
Sure.
and the details.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten to know you, like we talked about, the JDM Legends guys, Eric, Mauricio,
Yeah.
Josh, very good dudes. We have those people in common. We've worked together, like the classic auto show that we did in Costa Mesa. There's a lot of things,
Yeah.
JCCS, we spent a bunch of time together. So, you guys, whenever we have a community conversations, whether I know the person or not, it's always about the entire title of the Think Bigger project as a brand and as a movement, and then the Think Bigger podcast. It's not about cars, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
Right? We love cars. Many of us are deeply rooted in automotive culture. It's what we live and breathe. But in the end, it's about the human experience.
Yes.
How we think, bettering ourselves, and it all starts in your head.
Yep.
That's why it's called the Think Bigger podcast. And having you be a part of the community conversations is really good. It's been a long time coming.
I appreciate this.
It's great to have you guys. Please, for all of you listening, please take the time to check up on Daniel's social media. You can see for yourself some of the vehicles we've talked about and look into his business and how he's been able to do that. Take notes and draw from that what you will. And especially from this, a lot of people re-listen. Listen to some of the things he's talking about. And don't just listen, let it digest. Take it in and really see how you can apply that to your own lives, okay? So, Daniel, I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you, brother.
All of you guys, please take the time to interact with Daniel and myself. Please, whether it be the YouTube comment section or the post I do on my personal Instagram, use the comment section to ask us questions, state your feedback, and we'll continue the conversation in those areas, okay? Think Bigger podcast. Daniel, thank you.
Thank you so much. Be safe and be well.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks.